They told me not to come to my own brother's wedding, as if my presence were a stain on their perfect pictures. For years, I had smiled in family portraits while my name was quietly erased from the frame. I should have been angry, but mostly I felt invisible, like a ghost rehearsing life beside them. When I discovered that the special gift my parents bragged about was actually my stolen inheritance, the ground beneath me cracked open. If I showed up, I would be the villain. If I stayed away, I would vanish, so I chose disappearance with proof. The cameras always loved us, or at least that was the story my parents fed the world. Every Sunday, Mom set the dining room like a magazine spread. Linen napkins folded into swans, candles trembling in glass holders, dishes gleaming as though they'd been polished by handmaids. Caleb, my brother, posed at the head of the table with his fiancée, Harper, her smile dazzling and trained. My parents sat across from them, beaming with the pride of actors who never broke character. And me? I hovered in the corner, carefully arranged into the shot when necessary, cropped out when unnecessary. On Instagram, the image appeared perfect. Family forever, counting down to the big day. In the photo, half of my face was lost to a shadow. It didn't surprise me. I had spent my life being half seen. When the clip from that dinner went viral on TikTok, thousands of strangers praised us. Dream family, someone typed. Goals, another added. But buried in the flood of hearts and confetti emojis, one comment sliced through the noise. Why does it look like someone's missing from this picture? I stared at the words until my phone blurred. Missing. It felt like the truest description of me. The next morning, Mom called while I was at work. Darling, don't be so sensitive about the rehearsal dinner, she said, her tone syrupy sweet. You know how these things are. It's Caleb's day, not yours. She laughed as though reminding me of my place was a kindness. I had asked why my name was left off the program as Master of Ceremonies. For years, I'd been the family's safe pair of hands, the one who organized and soothed. Now, I was excluded entirely. You're overthinking again, she said. You always read too much into things. Gaslighting delivered like a lullaby. At another dinner, Caleb leaned back in his chair, grinning like a boy with a secret. Mom and Dad gave me something special, he announced, eyes flicking toward me with a glimmer I couldn't quite read. Our parents clapped their hands together, their pride spilling across the table. He deserves it, Dad said. He's been through so much. They never explained what the gift was. Caleb smirked, refusing to elaborate, and the conversation shifted. I forced myself to chew my food, though it tasted like cardboard. Days later, while helping Mom pack decorations for the wedding, I stumbled on a folder tucked inside a drawer. At first, I thought it was another set of invoices or vendor contracts, but when I unfolded the pages, I recognized numbers I had memorized years ago. The balance of my college trust fund, the one my grandmother had left for me. Only now, the account was listed under Caleb's name. My chest tightened, vision pulsing at the edges. The special gift wasn't some surprise watch or family heirloom. It was my inheritance. I confronted Mom gently, almost timidly, as though the truth itself might be too sharp to hold. Why does this say Caleb's name? I asked. She barely looked up from polishing a silver frame. Oh, sweetheart, she murmured. That money wasn't being used. It made sense to reassign it to someone who needed it. Her words hit like a slap disguised as logic. You have your job, your apartment. Caleb's still finding his footing. Don't begrudge him a little help. A little help? My grandmother's last act of love, repurposed without my consent. I felt the floor tilt, as though the house itself was conspiring to remind me I was only ever a guest here. I thought of that stranger's comment online, the one that lingered like smoke. Why does it look like someone's missing? The question wasn't about the photograph. It was about me. And the more I looked at those glossy pictures, the more I realized I had already vanished from the family long before the wedding invitation arrived. The group chat buzzed at all hours with updates about flowers, playlists, and seating charts, until suddenly my phone went silent. Days passed without a single ping. When I opened the thread, I saw I had been removed. No warning, no explanation. At first, I told myself it was a glitch, But then, a week later, a notification appeared. You've been added to Wedding Squad. My relief was brief. The first message I saw was a request. Elena, can you cover the final payment for the photo booth? We'll reimburse you later. I stared at the screen. My only role was financial. Not a bridesmaid, not a planner, not even a guest with a proper seat assignment. Just the bank account they tapped when convenient. I typed a polite decline and watched the chat go quiet again, as though my refusal had sucked the air out of the room. Soon after, I noticed subtle changes in the way relatives treated me. Aunts who once hugged me tightly now kept conversations brief. A cousin mentioned, almost apologetically, I heard you've been giving your mom a hard time about the wedding. My stomach dropped. Someone had been whispering in their ears, painting me as difficult. Another aunt leaned in during brunch. Don't be jealous, honey. It's Caleb's moment. Their eyes held pity, as though I were a child throwing tantrums, not a woman holding her ground. One evening, while scrolling through messages, my phone vibrated with a new text. It was meant for someone else, but it landed in my inbox. Don't invite her to the after party. She'll just cause trouble. I froze, rereading the line. The sender was a distant cousin, one I hadn't spoken to in months. The words felt like a knife slipped between my ribs. Not because they surprised me, but because they confirmed what I already suspected. I wasn't just excluded. I was branded as the problem. Sleep began to elude me. Nights stretched long, filled with replayed conversations that ended differently in my head. Was I overreacting? Had I misread their tone? My therapist once told me that long-term gaslighting makes you doubt your own memories. I found myself staring at old photographs, wondering if my smile had always been strained, if the arm draped over my shoulder was actually holding me down. Then came the live stream. Caleb, flushed with attention, propped his phone on the counter during a casual pre-wedding gathering. Viewers poured in, leaving hearts and compliments. Where's your sister? Someone asked in the comments. Caleb smirked, the kind of grin that always landed him laughter. Oh, she's probably busy creating some drama somewhere. That's her specialty. Laughter filled the room. Friends, relatives, strangers on the internet piling on with jokes. My name turned into a punchline. I watched from my apartment, my laptop casting the scene in cold light. The comments blurred together. Every family has one. She sounds toxic. Better without her. I shut the screen, but the echoes stayed. My chest ached with a pressure I couldn't release. The next morning, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Eyes swollen, skin sallow. I barely recognized the woman staring back. That night, an email appeared in my inbox. The subject line was blank. For a moment, I considered deleting it, assuming it was spam. But something made me open it. Inside was a single sentence. They've stolen more than you know. Attached was a scanned document. My hands shook as I clicked it open. It was a transfer of assets, an official-looking form stamped and notarized. At the bottom were two signatures, mine and my father's. Only, the signature under my name wasn't mine. The handwriting looked similar, practiced, but it wasn't mine. Someone had forged my consent. The pit in my stomach widened into a void. This wasn't just favoritism or careless cruelty or being left out of a group chat. This was theft, sanctioned and sealed. My grandmother's money, my future, my security, handed to Caleb behind my back. I pressed my palms against the desk, grounding myself. The words from the anonymous email burned in my head. They've stolen more than you know. Who sent it? Why now? And what else was hidden beneath the polished surface of this family? For the first time, I felt the poison wasn't just seeping into me, it was consuming the entire house, and if I didn't find a way to survive it, I would disappear completely. The message came on a Tuesday morning, blunt and stripped of any warmth. Don't come to the wedding. It will be easier for everyone. It was from my mother's phone, but the clipped phrasing was my father's voice. My hands trembled as I held the screen. No explanation, no apology, just an erasure dressed as practicality. For a moment, I felt weightless, as if gravity itself had abandoned me. Then the words sank, heavy and merciless, pressing me into the floor. Later that day, Harper called. Her voice was soft, almost hesitant. "Elena, I thought you didn't want to be there," she whispered. Confusion coated her words. "Your parents told me you said it would be better to sit this one out." My throat tightened. "That's not true," I said, the words raw and desperate. Silence hummed on the line before she finally breathed. "Then someone's lying to both of us." That night, I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. My phone buzzed again, but I ignored it until the vibration became unbearable. The message came from an unknown number. The signature wasn't forged by a stranger. It was your mother's best friend. "She signed it for you." I read it once, twice, then a third time, my heart pounding harder with each pass. The betrayal was no longer abstract. It had a face, a name, a pair of hands that had once braided my hair when I was a child. I sat in the dark, staring at the glowing screen, the room shrinking around me. Every memory of family dinners, every carefully posed photograph, every hollow compliment from my parents replayed in my mind, but now each scene was lined with venom. There was no going back. Whatever thin hope I clung to, that maybe it was a misunderstanding, maybe they loved me in their own way, shattered into dust. The following days blurred into each other. I drifted from bed to couch, dragging a blanket like a shield. Food lost its taste. Mornings carried no meaning. My reflection in the mirror looked hollow, my eyes dulled like extinguished lamps. The live stream comments, the whispers among relatives, my parents' text, it all swirled inside me like smoke choking my lungs. Sometimes I whispered to myself, trying to rewrite the story. Maybe they're right. Maybe I am too dramatic. Maybe I am the problem. The words tasted poisonous, but I swallowed them anyway. Self-blame was easier than facing the monstrous truth. The people who were supposed to love me had orchestrated my erasure with precision. One night, curled on the floor with my head against the couch, I thought about disappearing altogether, just leaving without a trace. No messages, no explanations. A silent exit, like the one they had already rehearsed for me. My mind wandered to bridges, to oceans, to the idea of vanishing so completely that they would finally feel my absence. And yet, even in that darkest hour, I knew they might not notice at all. But fate has a cruel way of leaving breadcrumbs. While searching for a notebook to jot down my restless thoughts, I found an old box buried in the back of my closet. Inside, tucked between faded letters and pressed flowers, was a leather-bound journal. My grandmother's handwriting sprawled across the first page, uneven but fierce, as though each stroke carried urgency. I turned to a marked entry, my breath catching as the words met me like a prophecy. They will try to take from her what is rightfully hers. They will twist papers and words. She must be careful. She must be ready. The air left my lungs in a rush. My grandmother had known. She had seen it coming, years before the signatures, the whispers, the betrayal. This wasn't paranoia born from sleepless nights. It was a cycle, a pattern, a theft foretold by someone who had loved me enough to leave a warning. I pressed the journal to my chest, tears flooding my eyes. For the first time in weeks, I felt the weight shift inside me. Not lighter, not healed, but redirected. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't imagining it. The truth was written in ink long before I discovered it. I closed my eyes and whispered into the silence. You tried to erase me, but I am still here. And with that, the darkness I had sunk into flickered. Not gone, but cracked. Just enough for a thread of light to slip through. The journal became my anchor. Each time I opened it, my grandmother's words cut through the fog like a lighthouse. They will twist papers and words. She must be careful. She must be ready. For the first time, I allowed myself to name what was happening. This wasn't simply favoritism or thoughtless neglect. It was an orchestrated system of control, a cycle of erasure designed to keep me small while elevating Caleb. In therapy, I whispered the phrase for the first time. Narcissistic family system. The counselor nodded solemnly. Yes, she said. And you've been the scapegoat. The label landed with devastating clarity. Scapegoat. It explained years of contradictions. Being praised for my accomplishments only when they could use me as a prop, being punished the moment I demanded recognition for myself. Love when it suited them, rejection when it didn't. My chest burned with rage, but beneath it was something steadier. Resolve. I started to document everything. I pulled screenshots from Caleb's live stream, where my name was tossed like a joke into a crowd of strangers. I printed out the emails, the one from my parents barring me from the wedding, the anonymous note with the forged signature, the cousin's misdirected text. I photographed the journal entries in my grandmother's looping hand, each word a testament to her foresight. Slowly, a paper fortress grew around me, built from receipts and proof. At first, anger fueled me, but soon, anger sharpened into something far more dangerous: clarity. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to beg them to see me. I only needed to hold the truth steady in my hands until the weight of it became undeniable. One afternoon, I met with an old attorney my grandmother had once trusted. His office smelled of leather and dust, lined with books that seemed older than him. He studied the document silently, his glasses slipping down his nose. Finally, he looked up, his eyes sharp despite his age. "You are not alone in this," he said. "Your grandmother anticipated their games. She left behind more than you think." The words struck like thunder. More than I think? What else had she left? He wouldn't elaborate yet, only promised to search through her archived files. I walked out of that office with my pulse racing, a flicker of hope igniting inside me. That night, I began planning. Not revenge in the dramatic, cinematic sense. There would be no screaming confrontations, no public scenes. Instead, I would disappear on my own terms. On the wedding day, while they paraded their curated joy for the cameras, I would quietly remove myself from their stage. Silence, I realized, could be louder than any speech. In the weeks leading up, I gathered what I needed: copies of financial records, notarized forms, every scrap of evidence I could secure. I organized them into folders labeled with dates and subjects, prepared not only for my own clarity, but in case I ever needed to show others. Meanwhile, the mask of my family continued to crack. Friends asked casually why I wasn't in rehearsal photos, and I deflected. Relatives texted me with vague reassurances. "Don't be upset, families fight. You'll laugh about this later." But I recognized the undertone. They weren't speaking to me. They were repeating scripts handed down by my parents. In the quiet of my apartment, I laid out the plan. On the morning of the wedding, I would drive away from the city. My absence would speak for itself. Later, I would release the truth, not in anger, but in facts so clear that even those desperate to deny them would stumble. As I packed one night, I returned to the attorney's office to collect the documents he had found. Inside the envelope was a brittle piece of paper, sealed decades ago. My breath caught as I opened it. It was a will, an amendment, written in my grandmother's careful hand and witnessed legally. In it, she had designated a separate account, funds that no one in my family had ever mentioned. The existence of this codicil was a revelation. Not only had my grandmother seen their betrayal coming, but she had acted to protect me. The money was modest compared to what had already been stolen, but its significance was far greater. It was proof that someone in my bloodline had believed me worthy, had chosen me intentionally. I clutched the document, tears slipping down my cheeks. This was more than inheritance. It was vindication. It was the voice of the one person who had seen me clearly, echoing through time to say, "You matter. I saw you. I prepared for you." That night, for the first time in months, I slept deeply. The poison of their betrayal was still in my veins, but now there was an antidote coursing through me. Hope mixed with fury, clarity braided with strength. The phoenix had not yet risen, but the ashes were stirring. And in those ashes, something unbreakable was beginning to take shape. The morning of the wedding arrived warm and blinding, the kind of day designed for photographs, but I wasn't there to be framed. Instead, I drove out of the city before sunrise, the sky still bruised with gray. My phone buzzed with missed calls and texts, but I ignored them. By the time Caleb and Harper exchanged vows, I was already miles away, sitting in a small coffee shop with my laptop open. My absence was not an accident, it was my statement. I uploaded the evidence carefully, like laying bricks into a foundation. Screenshots of forged signatures, copies of financial records with mismatched dates, the cousin's misdirected text, the live stream clip where my brother mocked me, the email that arrived without sender, and finally photographs of my grandmother's journal, her words warning of betrayal written in ink that still smelled faintly of dust and roses. I wrote no accusations, no venom, only context. "These are the facts as they occurred," I typed. "This is what has been hidden." Then I pressed post. Within minutes, notifications swarmed. At first, silence. Then the first comment appeared. I was a victim of them too. My breath caught. Someone else had lived in this shadow. Someone else carried scars I thought were only mine. Soon, the thread filled with questions, gasps, and fragments of long-suppressed memories. Meanwhile, in the wedding hall, the cracks began to show. A cousin later told me that the atmosphere shifted like a storm front. People whispered in clusters, phones glowing with the same post I had uploaded. My parents tried to smile through it, but the tension clung to the room. Caleb looked around, searching for me, confusion sliding into fury when he realized I had orchestrated my silence as loudly as he had flaunted his stage. By the reception, chaos had erupted. My father hissed at my mother, blaming her for not keeping me under control. She snapped back, accusing him of being careless with documents. Their polished masks slipped, revealing the venom I had known all along. Caleb stormed across the room, demanding explanations that had no answers. Harper stood quietly, watching it unravel, her bouquet wilting in her hands. Some relatives began piecing it together. "I remember when the trust disappeared," one uncle muttered. "We were told it was market losses." Another relative frowned. "But the dates match." I always wondered. What had been whispers in their hearts became spoken aloud. My post hadn't created the truth, it had simply validated what they already suspected. The public mask of our family fractured in real time. Guests shifted uncomfortably, no longer charmed by the illusion of perfection. The wedding, meant to be a performance of harmony, turned into an exhibit of collapse. Back at my apartment, I refreshed the thread, watching as strangers and relatives tangled in debate. My name was no longer a punchline in Caleb's live stream. It was the center of a reckoning. Then came the twist I had not anticipated. Harper stepped forward in front of guests, her voice shaking but steady enough to carry. "I've known the truth," she said. Gasps rippled through the room. Caleb froze, stunned. "I've known for months, but every time I tried to speak, I was told to stay quiet. I was told that marrying into this family meant silence." Her words hung like a blade, slicing the last threads of denial. I read about it minutes later when a cousin texted me a shaky video clip of Harper's confession. In the footage, my mother's face went pale. My father turned away, and Caleb clenched his jaw so tightly it seemed his teeth might shatter. The room filled not with applause, not with music, but with the raw sound of truth being spoken aloud. I closed my laptop, my hands trembling not with fear, but with release. For years, I had carried the weight of invisibility, wondering if I was wrong, if I was too sensitive, if my memories were flawed. But now, the story was no longer mine alone. Others had seen, others had known, and now they admitted it. The reckoning had begun, not with shouting, but with undeniable facts and the simple courage of silence followed by revelation. My family had built their house on deception, and all I had done was remove the scaffolding. The collapse was theirs to own. I leaned back in the cafe chair, exhaling a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. Outside, the city pulsed with ordinary life. Buses groaned past, children laughed in the park, the world spun unconcerned with our private implosion. For the first time, I felt the edges of freedom brushing against me, and I knew the worst was yet to come. But so was the best. Weeks after the wedding collapsed under its own weight, the legal machinery began to turn. My attorney filed the documents we had gathered, each stamped page a nail sealing the coffin of their denial. The court reviewed the transfers, the signatures, the journal, the codicil hidden for decades. Slowly, methodically, the truth shifted from whispers to rulings. The stolen inheritance was restored to my name, and with it, a recognition that what had been taken was never forgotten. The decision was clinical, written in dry legal language, but to me, it felt like thunder rolling across a long, silent sky. Justice didn't roar, it documented. And yet, the effect was seismic. News traveled through the family like a contagion. An uncle called me, his voice trembling. "I always wondered," he admitted. "I never had proof, but I knew something wasn't right." A cousin reached out next. They did the same to me, in smaller ways. They always had favorites, and it was never us. Each message chipped away at the fortress my parents had built. I was no longer the lone voice crying betrayal. I was part of a chorus that had been stifled for years. Some relatives even confronted my parents directly. I heard about shouting matches, slammed doors, relatives refusing to attend future gatherings. The system that had thrived on silence and complicity began to fracture, not because of my fury, but because of their own exposure. My absence at the wedding had been the first domino, and now the whole structure leaned toward collapse. One evening, as I sorted through my inbox, a new email appeared. No subject line, no signature, just one sentence. "I have been your silent ally all along." My skin prickled. Was it the same person who sent the forged signature? The one who warned me? Whoever they were, they had chosen to remain hidden even as they nudged me toward survival. I closed my laptop slowly, not fearful but strangely comforted. Somewhere in the shadows, someone had cared enough to help. With the inheritance returned and the truth vindicated, I faced a choice. I could stay tethered to the ruins of this family, circling the ashes, or I could leave and build something new. The answer came quietly but firmly. I had been waiting my entire life to be free. So I left, not in bitterness, but in reclamation. I rented a small home in a quiet neighborhood where the air didn't feel staged for photographs. I joined a local writers group where strangers listened to my words without reshaping them. I ran in the mornings by the water, each stride loosening the old knots in my chest. Slowly, I began weaving a family of my own. Neighbors who brought soup when I was sick, friends who called just to hear my laugh, a community that required no performance. I shared my story cautiously at first, then more openly. Not as spectacle, but as survival. At gatherings and online forums, I told others, "You are not crazy. You are not imagining it. Families can wound deeper than strangers ever could, and your pain is real." Messages poured back, people thanking me, people crying with relief, people telling me I had given them language for their own scars. In their voices, I found healing. My suffering had not been in vain. It had become a map for others lost in the same labyrinth. Months later, while cleaning the last of my grandmother's boxes, I discovered an old brass key taped beneath a drawer. It fit the small safe I had stored untouched in my closet. Inside was a bundle of letters bound with faded ribbon. On top was one envelope addressed to me. Her handwriting was shaky but clear. "The greatest revenge is freedom. The sweetest justice is to live openly while they remain trapped in their own lies. Do what I could not. Live." I pressed the letter to my chest, my tears wetting the paper. My grandmother had carried the same battles, the same wounds, but she had chosen silence. She had left me the tools she never used, and now I had used them. I looked around my small living room, cluttered not with pretense but with life. Books stacked unevenly, mugs left on the table, a half-finished painting drying near the window. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't curated, but it was mine. For years, I had been the missing face in their perfect portraits. Now I was the whole picture of my own story.